The following podcast is a work of fiction, just like gum disease. Don't let Big Dental tell you what to do. 4 out of 5 dentists are filthy liars.
Hello, curious minds. I'm Rebecca Morgan, and you're listening to A Beginner's Guide to the Occult, a podcast with a mission to educate you all on the mysteries of our world and to keep you safe from what lurks in the shadows. Or, in the case of this episode, what lurks beneath the moonlight. Because tonight I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about werewolves. Also, some things you probably don't need to know, but they're interesting, so I'm throwing them in here. So, why werewolves? Well, it's a podcast about supernatural creatures, isn't it? I mean, you knew that, right? That is the whole premise of the show. Come on now. But seriously, I wanted to talk about werewolves because there are a lot of misconceptions about them, thanks in no small part to their portrayal in popular media. And listen, I like movies too, all right? I go to the cinema. I'm a regular person. I just worry that people might start to confuse fiction with reality. This is an educational podcast after all, and I'd hate to see someone get hurt just because they think a werewolf will turn into a sexy shirtless man if they scratch it behind the ear just right. That's what Twilight was about, right? It's like a Princess and the Frog type deal, isn't it? I watch movies, whatever. So, here are the facts about werewolves. They are essentially people who've contracted a dangerous and incurable virus. This virus causes otherwise normal people to turn into vicious killing machines under the light of the full moon. Now, when in wolf form, they are beyond reason. You can't talk them down, even if they're your brother or your best friend or your fuck buddy that you really want to start a relationship with, but you know they're not looking for that, so you just pretend to be okay with this casual setup. You cannot reason with a werewolf. Now, I should mention that the Gosnell's Grey Witches Coven are working on a cure for lycanthropy. But, like all medical research, this is a long and complicated endeavor that may never see success. So for your purposes as a beginner in supernatural research, you should just treat it as incurable. The disease is spread through biting. If a werewolf bites you, you will become a werewolf. The only exception to this is if you die. Because werewolves don't usually stop at one bite, folks. That gruesome transformation uses up a lot of calories, and they're always looking to replenish. Now I am, of course, going to tell you how to defend yourself against a werewolf, but before I do that, it's time for a new segment, the Pop Culture Crunch, where I look at some pop culture examples of the supernatural and let you know if they're bullshit, which, spoilers, they usually are. So let's jump in! Werewolves of London by Warren Zevon. Good song, very inaccurate. Werewolves do not eat chow mein, unless you happen to have a friend named Chow Mein who's stupid enough to walk around unprotected during a full moon. Also, all werewolves have terrible hair, and that is a fact. Next. That one episode of The X-Files with werewolves in it. Now, I am a big fan of The X-Files because I like fiction, which this clearly is because aliens are not real. Most alien encounters are actually encounters with ghosts or other supernatural entities, but that's beside the point here. The episode Shapes is surprisingly accurate. It features the werewolf transforming back into their human form after being killed, which does happen. I've rewatched this episode many times for academic purposes that have nothing to do with 90s David Duchovny being an absolute snack. Next, Underworld. Now, listen, I really like this movie. I'm always a sucker for a forbidden romance plot, but werewolves cannot transform at will. Also, who fights in leather pants? That's just impractical. Next, An American Werewolf in London. Great movie and highly accurate. If you assume all London police are equipped with silver bullets, which I do, 10 out of 10, no complaints. Which brings me to my next point, how to defend yourself against a werewolf. Now, the most effective way to kill a werewolf is with a silver bullet, but I happen to live in one of those countries where guns aren't very easy to come by, so instead I wear a long silver necklace at all times. Does it look cute? Yes, absolutely. Can I take it off and use it as a whip if my life is in danger? You bet your ass I can. Now, I've never successfully killed a werewolf, but I'm not in the business of killing things. I'm a researcher. I have, however, been able to evade them using this method. The good thing about werewolves is that they have a time limit. You only have to avoid being killed until the sun comes up. So now, in the spirit of education, I'd like to tell you about my first and closest encounter with a werewolf, so that you might learn from my mistakes. But you have to promise not to laugh, alright? Because I'll know if you do, and I'll be very upset. So just remember that this was a long time ago, and I've learnt a lot since then. I was in a small rural town tracking down what I thought was an emerging satanic cult. It had all of the signs: cattle mutilation, increased activity in accordance with the lunar cycle, a lot of people coming and going from a nearby forest. There were also people going missing, which I thought were people being recruited, but were, in fact, just people being eaten. I'd seen all of this evidence, but it wasn't enough for me. I wanted to see the cult's activity firsthand. So I set off into the woods one evening around sunset in the hopes of observing one of their rituals. Now, here's what I should have done, and what I urge you to do in all of your own investigations. Check the lunar cycle. Before you do anything. Wandering into a forest? Check the lunar cycle. Going on a date with a mysterious stranger? Check the lunar cycle. Heading out to buy groceries? Check the fucking cycle. Anyway, on the night in question, I did not check the lunar cycle because I was, and still am, an idiot. It was still light when I set off. I was able to find a trail and I followed it, careful to check for anyone who might be following behind me. I needn't have bothered because the people I was looking for were already in the forest. After walking for about half an hour, I came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large tree stump, which I thought was a satanic altar, but as it turns out was just a tree stump. Sometimes things are just things. Anyway, there were 3 people in the clearing, and they'd all chained themselves to the gnarled roots of the stump. They were sitting on the floor, not doing much. I watched them from the bushes, waiting for them to begin some dark ritual. But what actually happened was much more horrific. As the sun went down, the full moon crept into view over the tree line. The 3 people started to twitch and writhe. They started clawing at their own skin, revealing tufts of dark fur beneath. I heard their bones crack as their bodies transformed into a sick parody of themselves. Within minutes, the 3 perfectly normal-looking people had transformed into hideous beasts. It was at this point that I started to suspect that these weren't actually satanic cultists. Now, I had been perfectly safe in my hiding spot while the werewolves were in human form, but once transformed, they gained heightened senses. They could smell me immediately and started pulling against their chains. I ran into the forest as fast as I could, believing, stupidly, that I'd be safer if I didn't follow the path. I soon heard a loud snap as the stump was torn from the ground. I knew I couldn't possibly outrun these creatures, so I clambered up the nearest tree, hoping that perhaps werewolves couldn't climb. It is important to note, listeners, that werewolves can climb. They can climb very well, in fact. This was a stupid plan. Fortunately, these 3 werewolves were still tethered together by the tree stump they were now dragging behind them. As they tried to climb up to reach me, their chains would get tangled among the branches and they'd fall back to the ground. The one and only advantage a human being has against a werewolf is that we're usually more intelligent. If you ever find yourself being chased by a werewolf, that is what's going to keep you alive. That, or in my case, pure dumb luck. I stayed in that tree all night, folks, hoping that the werewolves wouldn't get me. After an hour, it started to get a little repetitive, so I took out my camera to document the incident. An hour after that, I pulled out a book I was reading and knocked out a few chapters. I wrote up a shopping list, replied to some emails. Eventually, the sun started to rise, and I got to watch the transformation in reverse. Now that was an interesting sight. But unfortunately, I'd taken too many artistic shots of the leaves around me and a weird-looking bug I'd noticed at 2 a.m, so my camera was out of battery. But just trust me, it was weird. Anyway, once the sun was up, I found myself halfway up a tree with 3 naked people in chains at the bottom. They had no recollection of the night before, because werewolves never do. I decided to tell them I was just walking past and they happened to chase me. No need for them to know of my ineptitude. They helped me down, retrieved the clothes they had stashed under some rocks near the clearing, and then they insisted on buying me breakfast, which was really sweet. I had blueberry pancakes, and they were delicious. And they all had an assortment of bacon, sausages, and any other meat they deemed socially acceptable to eat for breakfast. They were thrilled to learn I'd kept them occupied all night because it meant they hadn't killed anyone. So all in all, it was a very nice morning, and I still keep in contact with the trio to this day. So if you're listening, hi guys, I hope you're having a nice day. Jacob, I hope you got that shit with your landlord sorted out. What a mess. Anyway, the point of that story is that we all make mistakes. But it's important to learn from them, and also to not laugh at other people's mistakes, because I'd never encountered werewolves at that point, alright? It really did seem like a satanic cult. So let's just shut up about it now, okay? Also, I would highly recommend incorporating some defensive silver into your arsenal, whether it's a necklace like mine, or some silver brass knuckles, or even some silver-tipped arrows if you want to go old school. Anyway, please tune in next time when I'll be talking about more spooky shit and hopefully less of my own stupid mistakes. Oh, hey gang, it's me, Rachel, the person who makes this thing. If you like this thing, you can throw some money at it on Patreon. You can also throw some follows at me on Twitter and Instagram at Rachel Fuka. It's really, really hot today, and I record this podcast under a thick blanket so it doesn't sound echoey. So I'm losing my mind a little bit. I'm going to get out from under this blanket and jump in the pool now. Have a spectacular day.